In the American wilderness, there are places so remote that the law does not reach them. Places where survival depends on strength, silence, and luck. In July of 1984, an Olympic-bound athlete disappeared on a routine training run in the Montana mountains. She didn't vanish in a storm. She didn't fall from a cliff. She didn't get lost. She was taken. Her captors didn't want ransom. They didn't want money. They wanted something far more disturbing. A wife. For 5 days, Kari Swenson was held deep in the wilderness by two men who believed the modern world had no power over them. They called themselves mountain men. The media would later call them outlaws. But to Kari Swenson, they were predators. When rescuers finally found her, one man was dead. Kari was bleeding from a bullet wound to the chest. And the killers had vanished into the mountains. This is a story of obsession, survival, a failed rescue. And the dangerous myth of the American wilderness. High in the Spanish peaks of Montana, the air is thin, and the wilderness is indifferent. In the summer of 1984, this was the training ground for Kari Swenson, a world-class biathlete on the verge of Olympic glory. But Kari wasn't alone on the trail. Deep in the brush, two men, relics of a bygone era, were waiting. Don and Dan Nichols. To the press, they were mountain men. To Kari, they were a living nightmare. This is a story of survival, a botched rescue, and the terrifying reality of a manhunt that gripped a nation. July 15, 1984. Kari heads out for a routine long-distance run. She is at the peak of her physical powers. But as she rounds a bend near the Ulysses Lakes, the modern world vanishes. Don Nichols, 53, and his son, Dan, 18, didn't belong in 1984. They lived off the grid, scavenged, and held a delusional, frontier-style worldview. Don had decided his son needed a wife. And he had decided Kari was the one. When Kari tried to bypass them, the illusion of a peaceful encounter shattered. Don brandished a rifle. The threat was immediate. Kari was bound and led deep into the subalpine forest, away from the trails, away from help, into a world where Don Nichols was the law. When Kari didn't return, the Big Sky community didn't just wait, they mobilized. Among the searchers were Alan Goldstein and Jim Scharf. They were fast, they were brave, and by the next morning, they had done the impossible. They found the camp. The confrontation was a chaotic explosion of violence. Alan Goldstein stumbled into the clearing. In the panic, Dan Nichols, egged on by his father's fanatical demands, fired his weapon. Alan was killed instantly. In the terror of the moment, Kari tried to flee. A second shot rang out. A .22 caliber bullet tore through Kari's chest, collapsing her lung. The mountain men looked at the carnage they'd created, unchained Kari from the tree, and did the unthinkable. They ran, leaving her to bleed out in the dirt next to her fallen friend. Kari Swenson did not die. Through a feat of incredible athletic conditioning and sheer psychological will, she stayed conscious until rescuers arrived. But while Kari began her long road to recovery, the Nichols vanished into the Madison Range. The media began to spin a dangerous narrative. They painted Don Nichols as a rugged individualist, a modern-day Jeremiah Johnson. It was a romanticization that ignored the blood on the ground. For 5 months, the Nichols evaded the FBI and local posses, living in caves as the Montana winter descended. In December, the chase ended. Starving and freezing, the outlaws of the Spanish peaks were captured without a fight. In court, the myth of the mountain man was stripped away, revealing only a kidnapper and a killer. Don Nichols was sentenced to 85 years, Dan to 20. But the real story wasn't their capture, it was Kari's comeback. Despite a permanent loss of lung capacity, she returned to the biathlon, winning a bronze medal in the World Championships just years later. Kari Swenson refused to be a footnote in a Wild West fantasy. She reclaimed the mountains that tried to take her life. Her story isn't one of a victim, it's a masterclass in the resilience of the human spirit.